On the evening of July 25th, 1991, a call was made to 911 from a payphone in Lancaster, Ohio. On the line was 24-year-old Matt Morgan, who calmly stated that shots had been fired at his family home on Briarwood Court. A short time later, Matt would walk into the Lancaster Police Station and tell the officers, "I think I'm the guy you're looking for." This is Crimepedia, and this is Systematic Failures, the Morgan family tragedy. Okay, Cherry, so Matt Morgan was the youngest of Jerry and Marlene Morgan's 6 children. Jerry was
6.
6 children, so big family. Very
Yeah.
similar. I was one of 5. It's always tough coming from a big family like that.
Yeah.
Now, Jerry was a retired police officer and had spent nearly 30 years as a fireman with the Lancaster Fire Department. Marlene was a stay-at-home mom up until the point where her kids had all started school, at
Mm.
which point she became a real estate agent in Lancaster, Ohio, which is a small city roughly 30 miles southeast of Columbus. She would be joined by Jerry in the family real estate business once he actually retired.
Okay.
Okay. Now, our case really begins when Matt was a senior at Lancaster High School in 1985. Now, during his senior year, Matt began having difficulties at school, work, and at home. He began skipping school, and his grades had begun to fall. In addition to that, he started having difficulties keeping jobs.
Oh.
He also started to become very disrespectful and verbally abusive towards both of his parents, to the point where they had grown afraid of him.
Oh, no.
Now, it was also around this time that Matt began hallucinating and hearing voices.
Is he taking drugs, or is this is just something
He,
that's evolved?
yeah, this is something that has just evolved. So
Right,
there's
okay, so this is a more
no known drug use or alcohol
no, okay.
use up to
Yeah.
this point. Okay.
So he's not being, he's not being bad. He's
Mhm.
not gone and got into himself into the wrong crowd and is now being a little shit. He's there's a reason, a mental
There
reason this
is,
is like an
yeah,
illness for this. Okay.
exactly.
Yeah,
Now,
okay.
that's not to say that he might not have experimented with drugs and alcohol
Yeah.
at this
But
point.
this isn't because of the alcohol and drugs. Right,
Yep,
okay.
yep. So for what we know, up until his senior year, he was just a normal kid. He
Yeah,
probably
okay.
had some issues like every kid has, but there was nothing that
Yeah.
really stood out that which said, okay, this is a serious concern. So he started to believe at around this time that everyone, including his friends and family, wanted to kill him. Okay.
Oh, no.
So this is really, really bad.
Yeah.
Now, he attempted to join the Marines, but he ended up being discharged medically from them after 2 months because he had flat feet. After that, he began drifting from job to job, and he was constantly struggling with distorted perceptions of reality.
Right.
Okay. By 1989, Matt began contemplating suicide. In
Oh,
the winter that year, he decided to hang himself from a tree along a country road. But after getting his car stuck in a snowdrift and falling asleep, Matt was found by a deputy sheriff and was sent home. So he did not was not able to go through with
yeah.
his plan. Now, the following January, so this is January of 1990, Jerry and Marlene were forced to have the Lancaster police remove Matt from their home after he attempted to fight his father.
Oh,
Now, he would first stay with a friend in Lancaster for 3 days, but after that, he decided that he had to leave because he could not control himself, and he
yeah.
began hitchhiking down to Key West, Florida. Now, as Matt drifted down the East Coast, he would sleep under bridges, he would wander around drunk, and he would go days without eating.
Oh,
Which to
dear.
me, this is a typical,
Yeah.
homeless situation, right? This is what happens to a
Yeah.
lot of people that are homeless. right?
Yeah.
They are forced to leave their home for whatever reason, and they become
Yeah.
aimless, and they don't have anything to eat. They become reliant on alcohol. So Matt is falling into this pattern of
Yeah.
homelessness.
Homelessness.
Mhm. Now, to his family, Matt basically just disappeared, and they did not know what happened to him. Now, in March of 1990, Matt once again would attempt to hang himself, this time from the rafters of an abandoned building in Key West. But he would change his mind and would end up cutting himself down, and he suffered only minor rope burns.
Good.
Later that month, Matt would find himself in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, okay,
Yeah.
where he walked into the emergency room at Thomas Jefferson University Hospital. Now, there he would be diagnosed with schizophreniform disorder and was transported to the Ketch Emergency Evaluation Center. Now, schizophreniform is essentially has the same symptoms as schizophrenia,
Yeah.
but lasts less than 6 months. Okay.
Okay. So it's like a
Now,
a period of
mhm,
schizophreniform rather than actual full-blown schizophrenia.
that's correct.
Yeah.
Now, once the signs and symptoms persist for a continuous period of 6 months, the diagnosis becomes schizophrenia.
Yeah. Okay.
And of course, schizophrenia is the inability to recognize reality in some way, and it's marked by delusions and perceptual distortions. There is no cure for there's no
No.
cure for schizophrenia, but the symptoms can be controlled.
Yeah, that's right. You can take medication. Some
Mhm.
people can be controlled. Some people can't, but there are
That's
some
correct.
people that can actually have their condition managed
Yes.
by medication.
Yeah. So yeah, like medications such as like Navane. Okay. So
Uh-huh.
that was one of the options. Um, Now I have one. I understand why why they diagnose with schizophreniform rather than
Yeah, because
schizophrenia.
it hadn't been long enough. Yeah.
So they're only they first off, he's only explaining, okay, well, this is what's happening now, and this is when
Yeah.
things started happening. I think he had the symptoms longer than 6 months by this point,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I think that it probably was around January where things really started getting out of hand.
Yeah.
And so he's probably only mentioning to the hospital, yeah, well, this is what happened in December, January, then I'm out and about and I'm been homeless. And so they're going, okay, well, it's the period is less than 6 months, so it's gonna be
Yeah, and you've
schizophreniform.
you've got no family there that's backing you up saying, "Well, actually, he did show signs of this when he was, like, at the end of high school, and we did there have been signs of this for quite a long time." You're relying on the person's own diagnosis, in which a lot of that they might not have noticed themselves. So that's a bit difficult, isn't it, if you've not got the family there to kind of give you a bit of a background on it. I
Yeah.
do think it's quite worrying also that with schizophrenia, people are quite often allowed to manage their own medication. And sometimes
Yes.
they will then say, "Well, I don't need this anymore because I'm fine." They stop taking it and they don't realize themselves that they're starting to lapse back into it. And that can also be, I just, yeah, it's a very, very
Exactly.
hard
Mhm.
subject, schizophrenia, really hard.
Exactly. Now
Yeah.
now Matt would be evaluated 2 additional times at this Catch mental health facility,
Yeah.
where it was noted that Matt believed that the government was affecting his body and the airwaves, such that he was unable
Ah,
to watch television or listen to tapes or the radio.
yeah.
He also had delusions of persecution and ideas of reference and thought broadcasting. Okay. So what this means
Right.
is with like the ideas of reference, he is basically taking things that are happening that are not related to him and he believes that they are in reference to him. Things that
Yeah.
are innocuous are being referenced to him
To him.
specifically. Yes.
Yeah.
And he's
Right.
also starting to believe that if he's watching television, for example, let's say you're watching the news. And so you believe that the news reporter or whatever is talking to you and about
Yeah.
you. And he's also
Yeah.
seeing things like on newspapers, like newspaper headlines, and he believes that they are writing these headlines lines for him.
Yeah.
So everything is being directed towards him.
And this is really common. This is really common with schizophrenia cases because a lot you'll hear this a lot that the
Mhm.
government are trying to get to you, that the television, there's people in the television trying to talk to you,
Mhm.
that when you're on the street, there's spies on the street, that the government are sending spies on the street to talk to you,
Yeah.
and that people are following you, and that they've been using your mobile phone to listen in on what you're doing, and it's like a huge paranoia. But it always seems to be like the government. It always a lot of
Yeah.
cases that I've
You're right.
read,
Mhm.
it always seems to be the government are trying to get me.
Yeah.
We've talked about it before. I've got a friend who I haven't seen for a really long time, and I know that he had an accident and had damaged his head, and I haven't seen
Yeah.
him for a couple of years really. And recently, I bumped into him, and it was the most surreal conversation I think I've ever had with anybody, and he was telling me that the government are trying to, they've been tapping into his phone, so he leaves his
Oh,
phone at home when he goes places
yeah.
because he doesn't want them to track where he is, and that he thinks that when he went to the pub, a government agent had put some stuff into his drink to knock him out, and when he woke up,
Mhm.
he had lesions on his side, and that's where they had injected him with truth serum, and they were trying to get secrets from
Yeah.
him, and it was just such a
That is
real surreal
that
conversation.
is really scary because things like that can easily be brushed off as just, "Oh, he's just crazy," right?
Yeah.
He's just crazy. But
Mm.
that's a serious issue. That can be a serious issue.
The thing that scared me the most about it
Mhm.
is the fact that he wholeheartedly believes that this is happening,
Yeah.
and he wants to help other people because he doesn't want the government getting hold of other people. And
Yeah.
so what sounds like it's crazy to us, to him it's a very very real thing happening, and he doesn't want, like he said to me, don't take your phone with you everywhere you go because they can track where you're going.
Yeah.
Don't always, when you're walking through the town, make sure you keep your eyes out because they might drug you. And I was
Mhm.
and I was like, "Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. Oh, yeah, will do." But he's trying to be helpful. And that worries me in the fact that what if he's in the situation where he thinks that a normal person, like a stranger, is one of these government spies,
Yeah.
and he thinks that he has to get rid of that person because
Yep.
they're a spy.
Mhm.
He's not,
Y
he thinks it's a real threat. He thinks this person is really going to hurt him.
it You are absolutely right. You are
So
absolutely right.
scary.
Yeah, it is scary. It is
But
very
also
scary.
because of his age, because he's an adult, you can't just get an adult like that sectioned, and given help because they're an adult. You can't just do
Yeah.
it. It's not that easy. It's
Mhm.
very difficult.
No,
Really,
you're
really
right.
difficult.
You are absolutely right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's scary.
Mhm. Now, Matt would be prescribed Navane that I mentioned
Yeah,
earlier, and so that's an
yeah,
antipsychotic or a neuroleptic drug,
yeah.
and he would then be admitted into the Ketch, respite facility on March 29th, 1990. Okay.
Okay,
Now, at the respite facility, Matt came under the care of Dr. Miles C. Landenheim, who at the time was in his third year of psychiatric residency.
right.
Now, Dr. Landenheim first saw Matt on April 2nd, 1990, at which time he rendered a primary diagnosis of schizophreniform disorder, which confirmed
Right.
the initial evaluation from Thomas Jefferson University Hospital.
Yeah.
Now, it was Dr. Landenheim's opinion that it was only going to be a matter of time before the 6 months period elapsed, and that Matt would likely then have schizophrenia.
Right. Okay.
Now, Dr. Landenheim would determine that Matt had developed a fixed paranoid delusional system involving his family, the government, unspecified industry, and others,
Uh,
including the delusion that he had a big lawsuit case in both Ohio and Florida, suing his family, aunts, uncles, and some other people, as well as a delusion
oh
somatic delusions
wow.
regarding his legs. So Matt believed that his legs were different sizes. So one leg was longer than the other.
Right.
And so he has multiple things going on, multiple issues.
A
So it's
lot. Yeah.
so it's not just these issues, these thoughts that the government was out to get him, but he was having
Yeah.
thoughts about his physical well being and his thoughts that one leg was longer than the other.
Oh, bless him.
Now, Dr. Landenheim also knew that Matt had a unformed paranoid ideation. He had ideas of reference from the television and feelings of thought control by others.
Oh, okay. There we go. It's the thought control again.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he know that Matt had feelings of thought manipulation, meaning that his thoughts were
Yeah.
being manipulated by outside forces or people,
Yeah.
and also thought withdrawal, which means that people were able to take thoughts out of his head,
Out of his head. Yeah.
as
Yeah.
well as thought reading, meaning that people were able to read his thoughts. So
Isn't it strange?
not
Yeah.
only are people able to put thoughts into his head, but they are also able to take them out of his head, and they are also able to read his thoughts. So
It sounds ridiculous when we explain it to like you and I. It sounds like a totally ridiculous thing. But to be honest, if I hadn't have met my friend recently, I would have just thought, "Oh God, this guy's crazy."
yeah.
But since seeing my friend again and realizing that he actually believes what he's saying, he actually believes that the government is trying to get in his head and take out his thoughts and take away his freedom, and that now is I it's worrying because I think that he's actually believing that, and that he thinks it's real is a really worrying thing because this must be really scary for him.
Yeah. Yeah, it'd have to be, right?
Really frightening because no matter where he goes, he thinks that somebody is trying to take the thoughts out of his head.
And this is all real to him. All of this
Yeah,
is real to him.
yeah,
It's
which is
not
really frightening.
yeah, it's this is not a mental health issue for him. This is reality.
No,
This is his reality.
yeah, yeah, and
I
that's
couldn't
really
imagine
frightening.
I couldn't not imagine living day in and day out like this.
And the thing is, it doesn't stop. Like when you go into sleep and stuff, it doesn't stop for them. For people that have got schizophrenia, it
Mhm.
never stops
Yeah,
because they can't take a respite from their own mind. Wherever they go, whatever they're doing, it's always there.
it's
It
always
must be
there.
so tiring and all consuming for them. It must be awful,
Exactly. N
really awful.
Now Dr. Landenheim, he would also make a note on April 30th, 1990, that prior to leaving Ohio, Matt was becoming increasingly agitated at home, and
Mm,
that he was put out of his house because of the threatening behavior that he had towards
mm,
them. Okay.
yeah.
Now this would be echoed by Matt's art therapist at the respite, who noted that he had an increased feeling of stress when feelings of anger were discussed.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, after referring to a particular example of anger in a drawing of a gun made by Matt on or about April 20th, 1990, she stated that this, coupled with aggressive line quality, indicates possible anger towards self and others.
Right.
Now, during his 12-week admission at the respite, Matt was treated with intensive therapy and was, of course, given medications, including some medications to aid in sleeping and to offset the
Yeah.
potential side effects of Navain.
Yeah.
Now, eventually, during this time, Matt's paranoia regarding his family began to decrease, and he developed improved insight into his mental illness. Now, Dr. Landemheim explained that Matt's illness could be controlled by medication, and Matt agreed that the medication was helping him and that his symptoms of mental illness may have contributed to his conflicts, especially with his father.
Right, okay. I don't really think that he you can take what he says because he's not in his right mind, really.
Yeah. No, you're right. But I think that with the medication and then also with the therapy that he was receiving,
Yeah,
he was starting to understand that his reality may not be the truth, right? That he was
right,
able
okay.
he was starting to able to separate his mental illness with reality. So he was
Okay,
starting to understand everything. He was starting to
understand.
see,
Right, okay.
okay, there is something wrong with me,
Yeah,
and I have to, this medication is helping and this therapy is helping.
helping, yeah.
And so then he's able to kind of pull everything together and say, okay, maybe what I believe is reality, maybe not the case.
Right,
So
okay.
how do we get to a point where I can break through
Function normally,
function? Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Now, Matt at this point began making contact with his family, and they did express a willingness to help him.
Yeah.
Now, it was Dr. Landenheim's opinion that Matt should return to his parents' home in Lancaster, but that the treatment and medication must continue in order for Matt to safely return to Ohio.
Yeah.
Now, accordingly, the staff at the respite contacted the Fairfield Family Counseling Center in Lancaster at that point, and Matt was picked up then by his parents on June 22nd, 1990, to go home.
Right. And it must be really frightening for his mum because you have I mean, however old he is, that's her child.
Yes.
And you can't help him. You can see that there's something mentally he's really struggling.
Hmm.
And there's nothing really that you can do as a parent, and it must be soul destroying to have to ask your child to leave or to kick your child out because you can't control the situation, and to be stuck between your husband on one hand and your son on the other hand. That's got to have ripped her apart. I mean, it
Yeah.
must have been horrendous for her
Hmm.
and for the dad, really, but it must have been
Yeah.
a really difficult time for them as a family
Hmm.
to have somebody who's dangerous like that. That's not his
Absolutely.
fault.
But it's your son, it's your
It's your
child. You
child.
want to
Yeah.
take care of them. You want to make sure
Yeah.
they're
And
okay.
you love them. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Unquestionable. It is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even after the issues, even after threatening behavior, still your son.
Yeah.
And it was obvious that his parents loved him and they wanted
Yeah.
to help him.
And it's hard because he doesn't it's not his fault. The way
No,
he
yeah.
is not his fault. It's
Mhm.
a mental issue, and it must be terrible not to be able to do something
Yeah.
to help.
Now, at this point of our case, I'm gonna warn you, Cherry. I'm gonna warn our listeners. This is when then very good chance I'm start getting really upset and really mad at this point. All
Okay.
right.
Okay.
So we are going from Philadelphia, the Catch Respite Center in
Yeah.
Philadelphia, and we're moving the story back to Lancaster, Ohio, in the Fairfield Family Counseling Center. Okay.
Okay.
Now, Matt would first go to the Fairfield Family Counseling Center on July 16th, 1990. After a intake evaluation, which was conducted by Dr. Ronald Gussett, Matt was referred to consultation with Dr. Harold T. Brown, who is a consultant contract psychiatrist to the facility. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
So he's doing contract work to consult for the facility. He's not really, I mean, he works for a facility, but he's not a doctor, like a full-time doctor with this facility.
With the facility. Right. Okay.
Hmm. Now, Dr. Brown first saw Matt on July 19th, 1990. Okay. From
Yeah.
his 30-minute evaluation of Matt, Dr. Brown noted that Matt was recently discharged from a mental health unit of some sort. Now, this is his words. Okay, was recently discharged from a mental health unit of some sort in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and was on Ellaville and Navane. He is out of medication. He comes to the mental health clinic for his medication, continued care, and help in completing a Social Security disability form. Dr. Brown also noted that Matt's experience in Philadelphia sounds like some sort of acute atypical psychosis, which does not present indicators of thought disorder or schizophrenia at this point.
What?
So in 30 minutes, Dr. Brown is basically saying everything
Yeah.
that happened in Philadelphia is bullshit.
It's shit. I mean, surely you would contact that facility in Philadelphia and say, "Okay, this guy has been transferred to us. What can I speak to the doctor that looked after him? Can we
Hmm.
talk about his, so I can see what his ongoing treatment should be."
Hmm.
Surely in 30 minutes you can't sum all of that up like that.
Well, you want to
That's
you want to
crazy.
know you want to know something else is crazy? Everything
Yeah.
that you just said that he should do about
Yeah.
contacting the respite,
Yeah.
never did it.
No.
He never did it. He never contacted the doctor in Philadelphia. He never talked to Lindenheim. He never contacted the respite facility at all.
Why? Why not? Negligence. That's complete negligence. That's crazy.
Well,
So
okay.
he's a certified doctor, right? Yeah, so
Mhm.
he is actually
He is
he
he
is
is a
actually.
doctor.
Oh,
Yes.
okay. So we're just making sure that this isn't going to be one of those ones where,
Yeah.
he's not he's not.
Okay, we'll get to that here in a second. So let's
Mm.
continue with Dr. Brown, right? So Dr. Brown
Okay.
did not make any final determination as to Matt's condition at that time,
Good.
but he did make a notation to rule out malingering because of a discrepancy between Matt's complaint that his legs are different lengths and Dr. Brown's observation that Matt's gait and movements were normal, and that there was a disability for him in the works somewhere. Okay.
Oh,
You know what this
yeah.
means?
Yeah.
Okay, so malingering means, in essence, he's faking it.
He's
He
faking,
wanted to
yeah,
rule out that Matt was faking all of this in order
to get the
the
disability.
disability. Yes.
Right, I see. Okay.
Now, later on, Dr. Brown would testify that he sees a lot, and this is in quotations, a lot of people that show up with SSI in mind, with a history very similar to Mr. Morgan's, and that Dr. Brown, he likes to think he likes to give it to someone. He doesn't like giving it to someone who doesn't qualify for it because he believes that it does a real disservice to them.
Well, he would know if he qualifies for it if he bloody spoke to the people at the other facility. He would have a bit of more understanding of what went on if he actually contacted somebody and speak to them who were dealing with him and treating him before.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
Now,
this is ridiculous.
at least at first, Dr. Brown thought it would be wise to defer his diagnosis and to continue the medication
Yeah.
to obtain his records from Philadelphia. So he did it. He
Yes.
did obtain the records from Philadelphia, and to go
Yeah.
ahead and schedule another appointment for a month later. Okay.
Right.
Now, on August 16th, 1990, Matt would go on and keep his scheduled appointment with Dr. Brown. As by this point, Dr. Brown was in possession of the records from the respite facility in Philadelphia.
Uh-huh.
But according to lawyers, it was clear that Dr. Brown never read those records and never attempted to contact Dr. Leidenheim.
Come on.
Instead, during this 15-minute session,
Oh, man.
Dr. Brown began to focus more on there being a strong factor of malingering,
Oh, come
or at
on.
least at overstating symptoms to gain Social Security,
This is ridiculous.
which at this point, Dr. Brown decided to reduce Matt's Navain medication by half.
Oh, you're joking.
Hmm. Yeah.
I can see why you're mad. This is negligence
It-
in like top form.
this gets worse. It gets worse. This gets
Oh,
worse.
Jesus.
Okay. So the next time Dr. Brown saw Matt was for 15 minutes on October 11th, 1990. Now, Dr. Brown would note that, and this is once again quotation directly from Dr. Brown's notes, we discussed his migration from Ohio to Florida to Philadelphia and back to Lancaster. He now chooses to view it as his extended vacation. No further insight as to just what happened to get him into the mental hospital in Philadelphia or why they may have prescribed neuroleptic medications for him. We discussed a plan to further taper Navain. He is now only taking one 10 milligram capsule a day for the last 5 to 6 weeks. When this present supply is gone, he is to take 5 milligram capsules once a day for a month and then discontinue. He will continue with Dr. Gussett in psychotherapy as Dr. Gussett and he both deem it useful. He was then also referred to a job counselor by the name of Nancy Lambert for what may help, which might for what help this may be in finding employment for him.
Oh, God.
His diagnosis at that point was that of atypical psychosis, not further specified, and in remission. Okay.
Oh,
Now, Dr. Brown would testify that this diagnosis of atypical psychosis, is
yeah.
kind of a wastebasket diagnosis when you think there's been a psychotic episode, but the information is not sufficient to make a clear, specific diagnosis. He did not feel that the information that he had or the observations of Matt were sufficient to make any specific diagnosis at that time.
No, I'm not pretending to be a psychic, not psychic, a psychosis
Mhm.
evaluator, or somebody who is in that field with those sort of qualifications. However, I would have thought that it would be completely common sense, no matter what qualifications you've got or what field that you work in, that you would see somebody like this and discussing conversations with them where they believe these things are happening, you can't then discuss treatments with them because
Mhm.
when they're especially in to see you because of a psychosis, even if it was nothing to do with the actual schizophreniform, the fact that he has undergone some kind of psychosis, psychotic episode,
Yeah, yeah.
it's like, well, you can't take that as that because you need to get more information. And I don't see how he can be making these decisions without having spoken to somebody else regarding
Mhm.
this. And to be reducing medication for him, it just sounds
Yeah.
ridiculous.
Okay, so this is the other thing. So we mentioned this Dr. Gusset, right? And
Yeah.
that Matt was supposed to do continue psychotherapy with Dr. Gusset.
Yeah.
I want to
Therapy
make
with
this
him.
very, very clear that Dr. Gusset is not a medical doctor. He has a PhD, but he is not a medical doctor.
So I don't understand how that can happen then.
Okay. So according to Dr. Brown, here we go. According to Dr. Brown, he had no line of authority or control at Fairfield Family Counseling Center. The style of practice there did not allow him to do the supportive psychotherapy, the verbal communication treatment models. So, what
Yeah.
he was getting in Philadelphia, that facility would not provide that to Matt. Okay, because
So
once again,
why is he there?
he's only there to he is a contracted consultant. He is
Yeah.
there to consult for the facility. He is not there
Yeah.
to provide treatment.
To treat. So
Yes,
what's the point? What the hell is the point?
Matt should never have been in this facility.
Should never have come back to this facility. Never. He should have
No,
stayed where he was, where he could get
no.
the treatment that was right for him,
This is
not
the
come back to this guy who's just consulting
yeah.
for them, that's making all these decisions
This is
that
a
are effectively going
facility
to change
this
things.
is a facility that, yeah, they're probably suited to handle, people with anxiety issues,
Yeah.
people
Depression,
with
maybe.
depression, eating disorders, maybe. This is not a facility that you send someone that is potentially schizophrenic to, right?
That's a danger to himself and possibly the public.
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
He should never have left
Mhm.
Philadelphia,
Yep.
really.
Yeah. So basically, at this point, so after Dr. Brown is saying it's basically they're responsible for monitoring Matt's condition after October 11th, 1990, fell on the facility himself. And that he assumed that if the counselors noticed something was going bad, that they would refer the patient back to him. And they and if this would also be if they believe that there was something like if there was medication that would help him, that they would
Yeah.
let him know. Okay. Otherwise, Dr. Brown would not follow up on the patient's progress,
No.
even though he had terminated Matt's medication.
See, I don't get this. This sounds like he's being palmed off and palmed off and palmed. Well, now
Hmm.
he's your problem. Now he's your problem.
Yep.
And I've just basically taken him off his medication and you let me know if anything goes wrong. I'm just going to like wipe my
Hmm.
hands of him now.
Yeah.
But if this is the case, how many other people does this happen to? How many people are there walking around that are
I don't want
having
to
these
know.
problems and these issues
I don't want to
that
know.
aren't getting the help that they deserve?
I don't want to know. It's,
No.
there are plenty that this has happened to.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
Plenty.
don't get me wrong. We've all seen those people that you're out, you're out doing your shopping or something, and then there's people that are acting really strange, and you think, oh God, you're a weirdo. But
Hmm.
actually, when you look at how this person has got into this situation and they're not getting the help that they, for instance, we had a local person recently who tried to commit suicide from jumping off of a bridge.
Yes.
Obviously,
Hmm.
very distressed, and obviously mentally something isn't right. The person was very anxious, suffering from severe depression. The person was then taken to hospital where they looked after them for a while, but there was no kind of support facility to happen. They were told to phone a number and speak to a number. The hospital looked after them until they had calmed down, and then they were let go. And then she literally came out of hospital, went straight to the bridge and jumped straight off the bridge again. And two passers-by jumped in after her and got her out again. She went back to the hospital and was given a phone number again. I mean, where is the end to that? Where is the help for that? Giving somebody who's got mental issues like that a phone number just where's the support? It's crazy.
Yeah. No, you're
It's
absolutely right.
really crazy.
And so at this point, I'm once again, I'm going to get even, it gets worse. It just keeps getting worse and
Oh
worse and worse. Okay.
man.
Now, between October 1990 and January 1991, Matt would continue psychotherapy as well as vocational counseling at Fairfield
Yeah.
Family Counseling Center.
Okay.
Once again, he was receiving his psychotherapy from Dr. Gussett and vocational counseling from Nancy Lambert. Now, during this
Okay.
time, however, Matt's medication ran out, and his
Oh,
mother informed Nancy Lambert that his condition was beginning to deteriorate.
yeah.
Marlene reported that Matt was pacing, that he was quiet, withdrawn, and moody, and that his eating habits had changed, and that he was becoming
Symptoms.
sick like he was before being hospitalized,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that he was regressing and needed to go back on medication. Now, Mrs. Morgan also reported at the time that Matt had made a deposit on the purchase of a gun.
Oh, no.
Yes. Yep. Now, Nancy Lambert, however, thought that Marlene was somewhat of a overprotective and controlling mother. That she was, and this is once again here, this is quote directly from Nancy Lambert, that she was worrisome. She seemed to be overly involved and overly concerned with Matt. And also, she had some questions as to whether maybe she was being exaggerating.
What?
This is a vocational counselor
The
determining
mum is
someone's
being
mental
too
health.
involved in her son, who's
Mhm.
obviously had problems,
Mhm.
and she's being too involved and too worrisome. He's just gone and bought himself a gun, and
Yep.
he's slipping back into the way he used to be.
Yep.
Why wouldn't you be worried?
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Now, when Matt had failed to appear for an appointment scheduled with Dr. Gussett on in January 1991, both Dr. Gussett and Nancy Lambert decided that Matt would continue only to see Nancy Lambert at that point.
No, because Nancy Lambert is rubbish.
Yeah. No, that's all he was going to see. So Dr. Gussett wasn't going to see him anymore.
So he's only going to see this psychologist
Vocational
lady.
no.
Vocation. Oh my
Vocational counselor.
God.
Yeah.
So not even a psychologist.
Mhm. Yep. After January, Nancy Lambert would continue as Matt's vocational counselor, and Matt's condition would continue to deteriorate further. He again became verbally abusive towards his parents, calling them names, insulting them, and wanting to fight his father.
So there goes the cycle again. He's gone back to how
He's
he was
going
before he
back
got the treatment.
exactly.
So he's
Yep.
obviously not it's
Mhm.
obviously not fixed. So he
Yep.
needs to go back on that medication ASAP.
Yep. Exactly. Um, on one occasion, Matt was getting ready to punch his father in the back of the head, but his father turned around in time to avoid it. Now, Matt would also at this time start throwing away food after indicating that he was hungry, saying that it was unfit to eat.
Poison.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
That's right. He's got
exactly.
it into his head then that
Mhm.
something's wrong with his food.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He started
Okay.
complaining of his legs hurting when there was nothing wrong with them. He talked to himself. He was observed telling someone to be quiet when no one was in the room with him. And on one occasion, he began striking a telephone pole repeatedly with a baseball bat. Of course, his parents at this point began becoming afraid of him.
Of course, because they're seeing it happen all over again.
Yes, it's happening all over again. He began losing weight. He complained of an aerial attack on his head, and he exhibited signs of paranoia. And of course, at this point, his parents are feeling extremely threatened by him.
Of course, because he's an adult. He's a fully grown adult
Mhm.
male who is obviously young and fit. And it's a worry because you don't know. I mean, he's got all these thoughts
Yep.
that he's got all these thoughts that people are gonna hurt him and the food that he's eating has been doctored. And you can't get away from that. So they're not safe when they're asleep. They're not safe when they're not, when they're not with him. He's not safe to be left on his own. It
Mhm.
must be really worrying for them.
Yep. Exactly. Now, Marlene contacted Nancy Lambert several times during May 1991 to report all these symptoms. Now, at that point, Nancy Lambert did schedule Matt for an appointment with Dr. Brown, but
Right.
Matt at this point was extremely resistant to taking medications and therapy.
Of course, he's
And,
too far gone now.
yeah, and he failed to keep the appointment.
Yeah.
Now, also in a phone conversation on May 29th, 1991, Matt's employer reported to Nancy Lambert that he was too weak to push a lawnmower, was on the verge of passing out, and did not seem to be totally in touch with reality. So all these people around him are seeing these
Yeah,
signs. All these
and
people are seeing
saying,
signs.
yeah,
Hey, there's
yeah,
something wrong. There's something wrong. There's something
something's
wrong.
not right. Yeah.
You ready to be really pissed off?
Do you know what? I'm really angry already.
No, you're gonna, this is worse, right? You ready for this?
Oh God, I'm
On May
ready.
30th, 1991, Nancy Lambert conducted an emergency assessment and concluded that Matt was not a candidate for involuntary hospitalization.
What?
This assessment and decision were made entirely by Nancy Lambert without the assistance of a psychiatrist.
She's not even qualified to make that decision.
No.
So why is she making a decision like that?
I don't
That
know.
should never be allowed. That should never be allowed. When you've got a parent that's coming to you and saying, "Look, this is happening to my child. This is going wrong again." You've got an employer that's coming in saying, "Look, he's out of touch with reality." You've got to listen. Surely she's not qualified to make decisions like that. She needs to get
Mhm.
someone in who is bloody qualified.
Now, at the time of this assessment,
Yeah.
the Fairfield Family Counseling Center had an unwritten policy that it would not initiate involuntary hospitalization proceedings, but it would become involved only after such proceedings were initiated by the family of the patient.
Right.
However, in this case, Matt's
Oh,
parents
here we
had
go.
attempted to initiate involuntary commitment proceedings, but the probate court, which they were trying to get him hospitalized through, informed them
Yeah.
that it would need Nancy Lambert's approval.
Oh no. And Nancy Lambert isn't even bloody qualified to do that.
That is correct. Yes.
I can't
Mhm.
believe this.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
This is just failure after failure after failure.
Yes. Absolutely. Now, on June 14th, Marlene Morgan sent a letter to Fairfield County Counseling Center seeking further help regarding her son's
Yeah.
deteriorating condition. She
Yeah.
specifically stated that she was concerned that Matt may become violent. Now, Matt was again evaluated for involuntary hospitalization on July 3rd, and again, it was determined that he did not satisfy the requirements for hospitalization.
Oh my God.
Now, this time, the assessment was conducted by Nancy Lambert as well as William Reed, who is a licensed social worker.
Social worker, not psychologist, not
Exactly.
doctor. Oh, come
Exactly.
on.
This was the last time Matt was seen at Fairfield Family Counseling Center. Okay.
Well, good because Fairfield County Family Centre is a pile of shit, to be honest,
Hmm.
and not worth even sending anybody with
Hmm.
any sort of medical condition to.
Yes. Okay. Now, July 20th, 1991. Okay. Jerry and Marlene Morgan sent a letter to a, a Dr. L. Patrick McGovern, who is a psychologist employed with Fairfield Family Counseling Center at the time,
Finally.
again asking for help. Now, Dr. McGovern reviewed Matt's charts, spoke briefly with Nancy Lambert and William Reed, and concluded that Matt could not be hospitalized or given medication against his will.
This is what I was saying to you about the being an adult. Yeah, but he's not of his right mind, so he's not right to
At
make
this
that
point,
decision.
he should have been involuntarily hospitalized.
Yes.
We shouldn't even
Yeah,
be
he
at
should have
this
been.
point. We should not be at
It
this
should
point by now.
no.
All right.
It's been let go too long.
Yeah. Now, Dr. McGovern would speak to Matt's parents on July 23rd and July 25th and inform them of his conclusion. Okay. The
Right.
last entry in Matt's charts at Fairfield Family Counseling Center was made by a Barbara K. Sharp, who is a licensed social worker who was employed by them at the time, after speaking with Dr. McGovern on July 25th.
Uh,
And that note stated that it was apparent that Matt is losing weight and decompensating. FFCC is unable to assist since he refuses medication or psychiatric care.
I don't understand that. Of course he's gonna refuse it. He's not in his right mind.
Exactly. Yeah.
He's going to refuse all help. And this is
Hmm.
why things like this are put in place. So that involuntary centers like this, you can get that person taken in for medical care because they're not in their right mind to make that decision for themselves. You've got the family that are saying, please do something, please take him in, do something. You've got our backing to do that. You know, his family know him best.
Yeah.
First of all, they need to get somebody who's suitably qualified to talk to him and not a bloody social worker.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just, I don't understand that. I just don't get how that's allowed to do that.
I know.
Every single one of these people involved in this case have royally failed this guy. And he's there just getting sicker and sicker and sicker because they can't do their jobs properly. And he's being passed from person to person to person who isn't adequately qualified anywhere along the line. And he's just
Hmm.
getting worse. And his poor family are just, they're begging for help and emailing and phoning and writing letters to people in a desperate attempt to get this guy some help.
Yeah. Exactly.
God, Jesus.
Now, July 25th, so the same day that
Yeah.
all this is noted, Um, Jerry and Marlene noticed that he could not stop fidgeting at lunch. He began walking around the house talking nonsense. He would go upstairs into his room and come down agitated and
Mm,
would storm off like immediately.
bless
Mar-
him.
Marlene would tell Jerry to not do anything to set him off.
Yeah, that must be so hard.
Yeah. Matt seemed to have calmed down by 10 p.m. when he and his sister Marla decided to sit down with their parents to play cards. At one point, Matt accused his sister of changing the face of the cards, but Marla laughed it off. About 20 minutes later, Matt excused himself to use the upstairs bathroom, but instead, he would grab a 22 caliber gun from his bedroom. According to Matt, his head was spinning. He thought the government had replaced his parents and sister with people who wanted to hurt him. He said the voices in his head told him to kill them. For Matt, it wasn't a matter of knowing right from wrong. There was only one way to survive, one way to get relief. No one noticed the gun until he put it to his father's head and stated, "Now you know the pain I've gone through the last year." 60-year-old Jerry Morgan crumpled to the floor in a pool of blood as 58-year-old Marlene and then 29-year-old Marla screamed. Matt would then walk around the table and shoot his mother, who fell at her husband's feet. Marla jumped out of her chair and threw her hands in the air, screaming, "Don't shoot." She passed out as Matt pointed the gun at her. When she came to, she thought that maybe she had just bumped her head on the table. She pulled herself up the hallway wall as Matt ran out the door. She dialed 911 as Marlene stirred and gasped for air. Firefighters found Marla standing in the front entrance in shock, blood splattered on her white sweatshirt. Marla would find out at the hospital that she had been shot. The next thing Matt remembers is calling 911 from a payphone. He didn't say who he was or what he had done, only that shots had been fired at their Briarwood Court home. He then walked the nearly 3 miles to the police station and turned himself in. Mr. Morgan died in the house. Mrs. Morgan died 2 days later at Grant Medical Center. Marla spent a month in the hospital and underwent months of rehabilitation to regain her balance and coordination. She still has no peripheral vision in her left eye.
It's it's just ridiculous. That is just crazy.
Yeah.
And he if he now gets the help that he needs, he's now going to have this for the rest of his life, that he killed his parents in a paranoid delusion that could have been prevented. Their deaths could have been prevented. There was no need for this to have gone this far. If he had got the right help from the right people, is completely unnecessary.
Yeah.
Completely. His sister's not only lost her brother to mental illness, she's lost her mum, she's lost her dad, she's lost quite a huge chunk of her own life trying to piece herself. It's just, this is so frustrating. It's just totally avoidable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Every single one of those people that saw him, every single one of those unqualified people, from the very first doctor, Dr. Brown, right the way through Dr. Gusset or whatever he was called, that woman, they should all be in trouble for this. They should all have to face some sort of repercussion because they didn't do their jobs properly. From the very beginning, they haven't done their jobs properly. There's no way a social worker has got any right to diagnose and to treat somebody like this, who's quite obviously from somebody who is totally unqualified. He's obviously got serious issues. His mum and dad are pleading with someone to help their son, and they didn't listen. And they've just shuffled the paperwork, and two people have ended up losing their lives, and another one has ended up with her life just completely changed, all because of that. It's
Mm-hmm.
disgusting. It's crazy.
Yeah. It's insane.
Is that facility still working? Is that Franklin County? Is it still?
Fairfield County.
That's it, Fairfield County. Is it still
Or
going?
Fairfield. Yeah. That is actually a good question. Give me a second.
I bloody hope not. And if it is, if you need to be sent there, don't go. I'd be very interested to
Uh,
see what they're doing now
I
there.
don't think it is. No,
Good,
I don't think it is.
good.
So just jumping forward, there was a lawsuit that was filed by the Morgan family against the counseling center, which
Yeah, good.
initially it was dismissed by a judge,
Oh
stating that
god.
they can't be found liable for what happened.
Really?
But that ended
Really?
yeah, but it ended up but that was actually overturned by the Supreme Court of Ohio, and the
Good.
case ended up being resolved, uh, out of court.
Oh,
I
of
think the
course it
family at the
did.
time was asking for, like, $9,000,000.
Is a
Um, yeah, so it's if I don't yeah, like I said, I don't believe they are open. If they are, they probably just change their name.
yeah.
How simple is that, right? We did something wrong, so we're
I
just
just
gonna
think that's
change
really
the name.
I think that's really frightening that that's been allowed to happen, that no one's gonna learn from that. There's no
Mhm.
repercussions for that facility.
Yeah.
No one's gonna learn. I mean, how many other Matt Morgans are there around? How many other ones are
Mhm.
there out there that have got the same issues, going through the same thing, that
Yeah.
aren't getting the help they need? How many more people are gonna die because of this?
Yeah. I know exactly. You're right. Absolutely right.
I think this is the most frustrating case we have ever done.
It is. And it's
I'm
frustrating in
so
a
mad.
completely different reason, right?
Yeah.
Because this could have been prevented.
Yeah.
And there's so many people that the system failed.
Yeah.
Now, after the shootings, Matt was charged with murder and was
Of
admitted
course.
to Central Ohio Psychiatric Hospital, which is now called Twin Valley Behavioral Health Care.
Uh-huh.
And this was in order to restore his competency so he could stand trial.
Oh,
Now,
come on.
at the time, psychiatrists noted that he had a quote unquote glued on smile. He showed no emotion while discussing the tragedy and would whisper to himself, which were all signs of his illness.
Yeah.
8 months later, in June 1992, he was found not guilty by reason of insanity on 2 counts of aggravated murder and 1 count each of attempted murder and felonious assault.
Right.
Now, the insanity defense is raised in less than 1% of felony cases nationwide, and it succeeds only in a quarter of those cases. So it's very rare
Very rare.
for
Yeah.
someone to be found not guilty by reason of insanity.
But in this case, it's apt. He was not in his right mind for
Mhm.
months and months and months before this happened.
Yeah,
And, I think it's right that it was, reasons of insanity that he was not guilty for.
yeah. Now, I think there's a public perception that when someone found not guilty because of
Uh-huh.
insanity, that they get to walk free. Well, that's not the case.
No.
Now,
No.
studies show that defendants found not guilty by reason of insanity are likely to spend as much time, if not more, time confined to a mental hospital and
Mm.
monitored by the courts, if released, as if they would have been sentenced to prison. Now, if Matt had been convicted, he could have faced 15 years in prison with an additional
Yeah.
9 years for using a gun. So we're talking 24 years in prison.
Mm.
But here's the thing: if he would have went to prison, he would not have received really any sort of help. And after his, his time, his
Yeah.
24 years, he would have been
He would
released
have gone.
out to the street,
Yeah.
right?
Out free.
hmm Now, Matt would live in a maximum security unit of the hospital for 3.5 years before being moved to a less restrictive, but still locked
Mm.
ward after he was proved he was no longer dangerous. While in custody, he would attend individual and group therapy. He continued taking antipsychotic medications. He participated in Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. He would keep a journal. He learned about his illness and relapse prevention techniques. And he began talking about the guilt, loss, and loneliness he felt.
Yeah.
So basically, so now he's back to getting the care he should have been receiving
In
when
the
he
first place.
came back from Philadelphia. Yeah.
Yeah.
hmm
But can this happen? Can somebody go through this and be then okay to manage their own medication in future, to be this is one of those things that there's no cure for this. There isn't you're not going to be okay again.
Yeah.
Can you trust somebody with this illness to be able to look after their own medication, to go back to a normal everyday life and hold down a job? I don't think so, because I think there's always going to be that in there
Yeah.
somewhere. And what would trigger that would make this all happen again?
In Matt's case, I think you're correct. So
Yeah.
Matt was released from the hospital on June 13th, 2000. with a long list of conditions, right? So he was required to take his medications daily. He was also required to take mandatory injections of a long acting antipsychotic as insurance. He had to check in with his case manager on weekdays. So on weekdays he would have to check in with his case manager, and he had to go to regular meetings with his psychologist and a psychiatrist for counseling. He, of course, was unable to buy a gun and was prohibited from returning to Fairfield County, where most of his family still lives, except to visit his parents' graves when accompanied by a caseworker. So while he does have some freedom, he has very he has these restrictions that prevent him from doing basically anything he wants.
But you say that he
Now,
can't buy a gun. He can
he can't buy a
he
gun.
can illegally
He
buy
can
a
legally
gun. He
acquire a
can't
gun. Yes.
legally buy
Yeah.
a gun, but he can
Mhm.
illegally acquire a gun. Doesn't even have to be a gun. What if it's a knife? What if
Yeah.
it's something else, you know?
Mhm. Yeah. Now, so after 2000, he would end up returning to the hospital in 2004, but this time working as a how do I want to put this? As a specialist. So he's like he would go as like a he would work for the hospital helping other patients. So kind of helping them with their cases and kind of, you know, giving this is what his story is, right?
Mm,
So
mm.
and I think he also helped run their patient satisfaction, you know, survey portion of
This
it.
is weird.
It
Yeah.
is. Now, he was good for many years, but in 2011, he was actually ordered by courts to return to the hospital as a patient.
There you go.
And this
There
was
you go.
because he actually had a long-term girlfriend, which she broke up with him
Yeah,
prior in
traumatic
2011.
incident.
And so
Yeah.
because of that traumatic incident, he started having these issues again.
Again, yeah.
Mhm.
And this is what I mean. This is what I'm saying is that I don't think that this is ever going to go away. There's always going
It's
to be a
not. No.
traumatic point in his life that he could not take his
Mhm.
medication.
Yeah.
Somebody's not watching him 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. He could not take his medication. He could then have a psychotic episode again and
Yep.
think that somebody and not have a gun and could go and knife somebody. He could abduct a child.
Yeah.
It's not safe. It's
It's not.
not safe.
No. Not at all. Not at all.
God, man.
So that is our case. That is the Morgan family tragedy.
And
Um,
that's exactly what it is. It's a
it's a tragedy.
tragedy. The
It,
whole thing
it
is a complete tragedy.
we've said this already, but I'll say it again. None of this had to happen. This did not have to happen.
No, no.
This has, I mean, this whole family has been affected.
Yeah,
He has 6 siblings that have to wonder each day, like, why did this happen?
yeah,
Why did my brother kill my parents? And how do you deal with that? You have a brother who you're supposed to love unconditionally, right?
yeah,
But he
yeah.
killed your parents who you love unconditionally. And
And he's lost everything.
he's lost everything. I mean, I think the family, the siblings, they wanted him. They knew he needed help. They knew he was
Mm.
sick, right? But how do you also kind of, I mean, you can forgive him, but you can never forget what happened and what he did.
Yeah.
He can't be
And
around his
that's
family.
no.
He can't, he's basically in a life of confinement, even though he's not locked up in a cell. He's he's stuck. I mean, this is his life. His life is medications. It's constantly checking in with people, and he can't live a normal life ever.
No, no. He can't. There's no way he can live a normal life. And the thing is, he's now lost his family structure. He's now lost the support that he would have had from his siblings and that he would have had from his parents. He's lost that. So
Yeah,
he's got nobody there like his parents fighting to get him kept safe. And exactly what happened. They let him out. He gets a girlfriend, traumatic experience. Here comes the mental illness back again because there's nobody making sure he's taking that medication. There's nobody
exactly.
making sure he hasn't got access to certain things that he shouldn't have access to. I'm sure he's got access to the internet. I'm sure he's got access to a television.
Yeah,
And it just goes round in a complete circle again. And I just don't understand how this can be allowed to happen. I really, really don't understand.
yeah. Okay, so here it is. So I mean, this was as of 2018, it looks like,
Mhm.
he was still working for Twin Valley Behavioral Health Care
Mhm.
as a peer support specialist. So basically, a peer support specialist meet patients at admission and provide
Yeah.
them with information about their rights as partners in their own care. They also
Right.
facilitate support groups, provide one-to-one support, and escort hospital patients into the community for outing.
So should he even be allowed to be doing that? Should he be allowed to be working
Ah,
with people that are poorly like him, that have also
yeah,
got paranoid delusions? I mean, surely that's not. I mean, that's like putting an alcoholic in with alcoholics,
I
an
guess,
ex-alcoholic in
yeah.
working with alcoholics.
I I don't have a problem with it, and I think, look, let's be honest. What other options does he have to contribute to society, right? He's he's never gonna be able to get a real, like, a normal job.
No.
Um,
In my
if
opinion,
he
he
wasn't,
shouldn't have been allowed to leave hospital at
yeah,
all.
but at least he's there, right? So
Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
at the facility. So
Yeah.
so he's being monitored. Even if he
Yeah.
doesn't know, he's being monitored,
But
right?
is he is he being monitored this
Ah,
time? You know?
yeah. I think so. I think it's good. I think it's good for him, and I think it's good for. I mean, there's they probably have a handful of these peer specialists, and I think
Mm,
it's good because it, and I think it kind of helps them understand their own condition when they are meeting with others, and I think it's good because they're also they're in these support groups, so they're all supporting each other.
maybe.
I mean, as long as he is being managed and that their reality is based in reality, I think it's fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's good. I think
But
it's good for them.
I just feel very wary of the whole institution because it's obviously failed him so many times before.
Yeah.
And he's had another traumatic experience and has gone back to hospital because it's not working. So to me that just worries me that like you say this guy is never going to have a normal life.
Yeah.
And it just worries me that it's such a fine line between their reality and their own, unreality.
Yes.
It's such a fine line between the
Mhm.
two, and I just find it's really worrying to for him to have, I don't know, like access outside, and I just think it should be a lot more rigorous, and there should be a
But
lot
do
more
you want people
done.
wasting away in hospitals?
Not at all. No, I don't want him to waste away, not at all. But I just worry that being allowed out and being allowed to manage your own medication, I just worry that he's not going to, and that there is a chance that he could be relapsing and nobody's going to actually notice, because sometimes it can be quite a while before they realize how far this person's gone. So it just worries me that perhaps, for his own sake, I worry that he's not getting the care that he should get again.
Yeah, I understand. I'll tell you what though. How about we continue this conversation on our next Crimepedia Extra?
Yeah, that's a great idea. That's a good idea.
So if you are not currently a part of our Patreon and you'd like to continue this conversation with us, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/crimepedia, and you will be able to listen to the continuation of our discussion. And I think we might have a special guest or two that will join us for a little round table on this one.
Yeah, I like that idea. That's a great idea. Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you for this case. It was really interesting and something a bit different to what we normally do.
Yeah,
Frustrating as hell,
it's
but
frustrating.
but
It's
interesting.
heartbreaking.
Yeah, it's a very heartbreaking. That's a great
It
way to
was
describe it.
tough getting because I knew it was coming. Of course, I knew it was coming. When we got to
Yeah.
July 25th, it was tough
Yeah.
because it's just,
I just wish I could have done something. I wish I could have
yeah,
done something to his mum and dad didn't have to die. He didn't have to lose his parents, who he obviously loved. He only shot them because he thought they were
they weren't
replaced
they weren't
by the
him. They weren't
government.
they were
They
not
weren't
his
his
parents.
parents.
They were not his
Exactly.
parents.
And that's so upsetting because
Yeah,
he now knows that he actually killed his own parents. That's traumatic enough for him.
yeah,
That's just horrible.
it is.
It's horrible.
And we'll say it again. It's just failed in so many ways. There were
Yeah,
so
really
many
bad.
failures in this. I mean,
Yeah.
you have a counseling center
Multiple.
which he should not. Okay, I think that, well, of course, that's where it starts. The counseling center. He
Mm.
should never have been there. He should have
No.
been.
He should never left Philadelphia.
Should have been in a hospital, something,
Yeah.
right?
Mm.
You have a facility that he's not getting the proper care. He's not having people properly watch over him. He has a vocational counselor watching over him and his well-being. You have a probate court which is siding with this counseling center in hospitalization. It's
Mm.
crazy.
And please, 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 if you work in that line of work, if a parent comes to you and is asking you for help because their child's not right and not well, listen to them for God's sake. They
Yep.
know that person better than anyone. I just feel so mad for his mum because she's like at her wit's end. It's crazy. But yeah, thank you very much. And I would love to know your thoughts on this case. I know that there's probably quite a few people that have maybe had a similar experience to this, maybe not gone as far as this, but
Yeah.
it's something that is quite common.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Mm.
Thank you very much.
You're
Well, we
welcome.
will be back next week with another one. But before we do that, we do have a dumb criminal for you. I've got a fun one for
Yeah,
this
we
week.
need it because
So if you're listening to this show for the first time, at the end of the show, usually we will try and be a bit more lighthearted because obviously the stuff that we talk about is quite often quite upsetting and
yeah.
horrible. And we try to give you a little bit of humor at the end of the episode. So we do a segment called Dumb Criminal, in which we will tell you some of the very silly things that criminals tend to do. And today's one, are we going to get the captain to call out our criminal?
Let's do it here. Hey, Captain.
Hey, Captain Stupid Poopy Pants. Use a dummy.
And this one is a dummy. So, police in, I don't even know how you say this. Is it Ossining in New York?
How you spell it? Spell it.
So it's Ossining.
O double S. Or man. Oswego.
Yeah. I don't know.
O
Oss
O double S I
Ining.
N I N G.
How do you even say that?
Ossining,
Ossining? Yeah, I don't know. So
Ossining.
that's
Sorry
the
if you're
place
from Ossining, New York.
in New York. The New York I can get, the rest of it, not so
How
much.
about we just say
So
in Westchester County, New York?
let's just do that. So, police in Westchester County, New York, were called to a mini mart where they found a guy called Blake Leake, who was 23, trying to break into the mini mart. So, they chased him
Okay.
through the streets until both cops fell over. So they
Oh,
tripped
okay.
over different things. They
All right.
chased him. So they were chasing him. They fell over. Now he seized the opportunity, realizing that they had both fallen over, and he sought refuge on the grounds of this huge building. The building was the Sing Sing maximum security
Oh,
prison,
no.
where he was promptly nabbed by a
Oh,
guard.
no. Oh,
So running away
no.
from the police, he runs into a prison to get away from the
Oh,
police.
my God.
Oh, poor old Blake. So yeah, unfortunately for him, he was then arrested.
That is terrible.
And that is our dumb criminal for this week.
Hey, how about you not take a break at a prison?
Oh, I just thought that was really funny. It really tickled me when I found that one. I
That's
thought
a
it was
good
really
one.
good. Of all the
Yeah.
places, like last week, of all the places to take a leak, you do on a police car. This
Yeah.
week, of all the places to run and hide, you hide in a prison. Come on.
You have to,
So
and here's
yeah.
the thing. I mean, this is a small little area, small little
Yeah.
village. You have to know what it
Yeah.
is. What are you
Of
doing?
course. I know. I mean, prisons, they look like prisons,
Oh,
right? They
no.
do,
Yeah.
come on.
This looks like a nice little
Silly
place to take a
thought.
little rest. Or
Yeah.
take a yeah. No, no,
Yeah.
no. Come
I'll just
on.
hide here.
Very good. That's funny.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's this week's dumb criminal for you, and we will be back next week with a new case. It'll be my case next week,
Yep.
and we'll be back then. So in the meantime, you can find us on all our socials as usual. Find us on Instagram. I think we're mostly on, aren't we? We tend to use that a lot more than anything else. If you want a quick answer, Instagram is the place to go. And yeah, we'll be back next week. So thank you very much for your case this week. We'll
You're
see you next
welcome.
week. So for now, be nice.
And bye.